As we get closer to the inauguration day, it still looks like Joe Biden will be our next president. So where does he stand on the Second Amendment? Is he pro-gun, anti-gun, or somewhere down the middle? Well, today we're going to walk through some of his past statements, and we're going to look at his current campaign website to determine where he stands on the Second Amendment. So this is a website called On the Issues, and this website documents anything a politician has to say about a certain issue. So if you were to look on Joe Biden's stance on gun control, through this bulleted list, it shows all different things that he said throughout his political career. So if you were to just walk down, it says, I pushed the Brady bill when other Democrats voted against it, beat the NRA twice, AR-15s, high-capacity magazines, again, only candidate to beat the NRA, public supports gun control, Congress has to catch up, he wants to keep the assault weapons ban, close the gun control loophole, and of course, that was in 2007, but now I want to fast forward to his current campaign website, and we're going to see if he still holds some of these same stances on these issues. Now, all of this is on Biden's campaign website, so you can view it on your own if you ever wish to do so. But we're just going to walk through what he says on it, and I'll give you my brief opinion on it afterwards. Now, first says he wants to hold gun manufacturers accountable. So what he means by this, and this is something that Democrats often talk about, is they want gun manufacturers to be responsible if somebody goes out and commits a horrific act with their firearm. Now, this is the most ridiculous thing, because do we ever go after car manufacturers when somebody maybe goes into a car, is behind the wheel while they're intoxicated and goes and hurts somebody else? The answer is obviously no. So why is it when it comes to the issue on guns, we always like to point to the gun itself and not the individual that committed the act or the crime? Just a brief note, he wants to get weapons of war off of our streets, so they always tout an assault weapons ban or things along those lines. Now, of course, an assault weapon is something that Democrats just like to talk about. It's a good political buzzword because people that don't know anything about guns, they hear that and they think, oh my God, this must be a crazy weapon that's used, by our troops and our military. An AR-15 is a civilian version of the M4 M16 style rifle. It is not the same thing. Just so you know, an assault weapon is something that is capable of burst mode or fully automatic fire. An AR-15 is sold as a semi-automatic rifle. So I understand it looks the same, but it functions completely different. Rant over. Just moving down the list. Ban the manufacturer and sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Okay, so just so you know, I'm going to put this, there we go, it comes up nice and easy. This is a 30-round body magazine, okay? And I've already said before, I live in New Jersey, so this is a 10-round magazine. Mr. ATF agent, you don't have to come to my house, raid it, and shoot my dog. But a high-capacity magazine, based in my state, is anything holding more than 10 rounds. 30 rounds, I just said this is a 30-round body. 30 rounds is considered standard capacity. So now, again, you're just getting into political theater, makes people feel good, and it's politicians that have no idea what they're talking about, trying to tell law-abiding Americans what they can and can't own. The campaign website goes on to say, regulate possession of existing assault weapons under the National Firearms Act, buy back assault weapons and high-capacity magazines already in our communities. Now, this was a big one that I heard specifically from people that were campaigning for Biden, because they're trying to say that this is a voluntary buyback, which first and foremost, you never bought the gun from the government in the first place, so I don't understand how the government buys it back, but that's a note for another day. Well, here's the deal. If this were to actually go through and be enacted, what would happen is one of two things. You can either, one, sell it to the government, or two, you would have to register that firearm under the NFA. Now, what happens there is your name basically gets put on a list and the government knows you have a particular item. Let me ask you this. If Democrats were to win the Senate runoff and then they were to go on to pack the Supreme Court, do you think your name would just sit on a list? Or do you think they would potentially use that to then start a little bit of a gun confiscation scheme? Up for debate, but I'll tell you what, I don't want my name going on any list based on something that I own. But they go on, keeping guns out of dangerous hands, require background checks for all gun sales. I'm going to show you something called a 4473, and we're going to talk from there. So this right here is what a 4473 looks like. And what happens is every time you go to purchase a firearm, it could be at a gun show, it could be from a local FFL, which is just a federally licensed dealer, okay? you have to submit this to the instant background check system. So you can see you have to put your information in, okay? Then they ask you certain questions like, have you ever committed a felony? You've been ruled that you can't own a firearm in the past, right? Things along that nature. So once you fill this out, you submit it, goes into the instant background check system. If you get the green light, then you can move forward with your transaction. So Democrats like to try and say that, well, there's certain purchases where they don't use a background check, and that's not true. Every single firearm I have ever purchased from an FFL, I have had to do an instant background check. This is political theater from people who have no idea what they're talking about, probably because they have never bought a gun in the first place, and they're simply saying these things to make it seem like, oh my God, you can walk into a gun store, you can just put your ID down, give them cash, and you can walk out with anything that you want. That's not true. There's many things that you can find on this particular website, but I wanted to talk about the Charleston loophole. So what this goes on to say is they want to close this to where if your background check isn't completed in 3 business days, you should still not be able to move through and purchase that firearm. Now again, they use a particular incident to try and further their political gain. Why? Because it appeals to emotion. So someone who maybe doesn't own firearms would read this and say, well, what's the big deal? Absolutely. We should want to prevent individuals, with past convictions and stuff like that from owning firearms. And the reason why this is a slippery slope is because at any point, if you hand this power over to the federal government, they could extend that period from 3 days to 10 days to 1 month, so on and so forth. And then what you're going to get is your 4473 sitting on a government table or maybe waiting to get cleared, and they don't have to do it. Why? Because they pushed back when the government actually has to sort of transact and push these particular background checks through. So again, I'm very hesitant to give that power to the federal government. They do a heck of a job making it sound all good and making people feel all warm and fuzzy, but to me, it's just another way that Democrats can infringe upon our rights, which, by the way, shall not be infringed. That should be something cut and dry, but apparently there's much more to it. Another thing worth noting is that somewhere along the campaign trail line, Joe Biden said that he wanted to appoint Beto O'Rourke to oversee the gun issue in this country. Now, this is a famous quote from Beto O'Rourke, and it reads, "Hell yeah, we are going to take your AR-15. If it's a weapon that was designed to kill people on the battlefield, we are going to buy it back." Okay. I already stated before that an AR-15 is not a weapon of war because it is the civilian version of an M4 M16 variant. So you might still feel, after all the things I walked through, that Joe Biden is somehow pro-gun. But then you have to ask yourself, who is he potentially going to surround in his cabinet? Who is he going to appoint, and what are their stances? Because at the end of the day, it's not just him that gets to push everything through. He needs Congress. He needs the Senate. So that's something that I really want to bring to the table, because even if you think Joe Biden is somehow not anti-gun, look at who he is potentially going to appoint, and that will tell you the full story. And one last thing about Joe Biden with his stance on guns. He's pretty famous for once saying that if you are scared someone's breaking into your home, first and foremost, you should have a double-barrel shotgun because it's easier to use than an AR-15. I know, just hang tight. And he said that if you felt someone was breaking into your home, go out on the front porch and fire off a shot into the air. Okay, with that out of the way, let's walk through that particular example. So there's a saying that every bullet that leaves your chamber has a lawyer attached to it. And the reason for that is because you're responsible for what that bullet hits, for where it goes. So firing a round off into the air is not the most intelligent thing to do. But again, it's coming from someone who has no idea about guns, so what do you expect? And the next thing, just very brief, is if you had a double barrel shotgun and that's the only thing you had, why would you fire one of the rounds off when there's still potential for someone else to run up on you and do whatever it is that they were trying to do to you in the first place? Put you at a pretty severe disadvantage. And I'm willing to bet that whoever's firing that double barrel shotgun off in the air has no idea in terms of proper training to reload that in a timely manner. So with all of that out of the way, and I know it's a lot, I want to talk to you about why you shouldn't trust not only Joe Biden with his stance on guns, but Democrats in general. First and foremost, I've said before, I am from the state of New Jersey, so we have our own assault weapons ban that's still in effect. Yes, there's many other free states out there, and I wish I could say I was a part of a free state as well. So with our particular assault weapons ban, years ago, when I first got into shooting, you could own a magazine that holds 15 rounds, okay? Now, once Governor Murphy got into office, for no apparent reason, okay, 15 turned to 10. And if he really had his way with other things, he would make it to where there would be an additional tax on ammunition. There would be things like raising the price for having a background check, raising a price for having an FID card, which is something in New Jersey, which is just another way that they tax you, because you have to submit a background check to get this card to then say you can buy a gun. But then when you go to buy the gun, you have to submit a background check again. So yeah, welcome to New Jersey. And I think it's because people didn't think that the gun laws and the gun control would go even further. They said, okay, we gave them our 30 round mags. Okay, here, we're good with 15. And while we were doing whatever it is that we were doing, they turned 15 into 10. Guys, they're coming for the guns no matter what, okay? There's no way around it. They can sit there all they want and say, well, we're for common sense legislation. They make you feel all warm and fuzzy saying, we're just trying to save the public, yada, yada, yada. It's all a bunch of hearsay. They don't like you being independent from them. And they want to make sure that if they ever wanted to have complete rule of law over you, they could do so very, very easily. When do you think 10 is going to turn into 5? Okay? If you don't stick your heels into the sand and fight on this issue, it's going to go away in our lifetime. And there's no question about it. Because they constantly harp on law-abiding gun owners. We are the ones that are the most responsible that society has to offer. But yet, whenever there's an idiot that goes around and hurts a bunch of people using a firearm, they blame us. Something I wanted to now get into, it was just to say, do you remember when it was the summer of love, 2020, and you had all of the rioting and all of the looting? I understand there was some protesting too, but there was absolutely rioting and looting. Notice how, when we tried to point that out, Democrats and people along those lines said, you're just using selective news. There's so much more peaceful stuff happening than people rioting and looting. You have no idea what you're talking about, right? And they said, you're a terrible person if that's what you want to point out. So why is it that they can say, well, no, it's mostly peaceful, but then when we try to say, well, we're mostly peaceful when it comes to being law-abiding gun owners, they like to stuff that 0.001% of the bad apples and apply it to all of us. Just something I wanted to get off my chest, makes me feel a little bit better. But this is obviously a super hot topic simply because the state of the Second Amendment really lies in the hands of Georgia with this Senate runoff. So let me know what you think. Prior to 2020, were you already someone that believed in the Second Amendment? Was 2020 the year that showed you that, whoa, if cops are going to have the blue flu, I need to take matters into my own hands? So was 2020 the year that you got into guns or personal safety, things along those lines? Let me know your thoughts. But as always, everybody, appreciate you giving me the time and checking out the channel, especially for long ones like this. But I hope you'll check out some more videos again sometime soon.